Morning.
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
Hey, Nancy.
Morning.
Hey, am I on?
Morning.
You are.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Still recovering.
I am so impressed with y'all that remembered and chose to show up after a long weekend. You guys are good, dedicated learners.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah.
We were just talking about how long it's been since we've been doing insiders. I know it's over 10 years. I honestly don't remember when the first one was. But what I was thinking about is, and they've always been the second Tuesday of the month. And we've honored that. And then I was thinking, is it better to keep that date in perpetuity, or when you get a holiday weekend, should you move it? Because it is crazy when somebody comes back from a long weekend to try and do something like this. But we've honored the second Tuesday again. So again, I am happy and impressed to see all of y'all here. Are any of you, I know some of you I recognize and have been here before, but are any of y'all first time? Just give me a wave if you're first timer at Insiders. Ah, all right. Well, thank you. Welcome. Yes. I'm doing a little bit of virtual tap dancing here because I like to give people a chance to come in and not miss any of the valuable presentation that we do. So somebody tell me something wonderful that you did over the long weekend. How about something sort of good that you did?
Spent the week or a few days at the beach with my family. So that was fun.
Okay, I'm envious of that one. That's good.
Me too. I'm envious.
No one else had a fun weekend?
I did.
I did.
Oh, good.
Rodney.
Oh, good.
Uh,
Good.
We have grandchildren 3 and 5, and we took them. I bought them fishing equipment
Oh,
for their very first time, and they both caught 3 fish each.
Oh, that's great.
Got some nice pictures to go with it.
That's
I
awesome.
love
That's
it.
fabulous.
That's great.
Well, I'm glad my 5-year-old grandson isn't on this call now because he would be so envious. And so I'm glad he's not hearing that you're a better grandparent.
You'd have to go buy fishing equipment
Yeah,
though, and take him
absolutely.
fishing.
Good morning. This is DeQuanda. I got a chance to take advantage of this wonderful botanical garden that we have here. A great expo, as well as the High Museum. They had a exhibit, several great exhibits this weekend as well. So just took advantage of my membership and got a chance to get out and do some social distancing and be out in the air. So that was great.
Where are you located, DeQuanda?
In Atlanta,
Atlanta.
Georgia.
Okay, we have a botanical garden here in Charlotte too, so I was just curious.
I want to go see the Chinese lantern. They
Yeah.
have that right now. I want to see that.
Yes.
Well, I think we have almost a critical mass here, so get started. Deb, is there anything you want to say by way of formal introduction?
Well, I will formally
You what?
welcome everyone now. And
Oh, so she
again-
was
And again, thank everyone for joining us today, particularly after a long weekend.
Oh, everybody always wants to know why, you know.
It's a real testament to our Insiders program, and I hope you will all find that your time
she's
was
just not
well
doing the job.
spent. So I'm going to take this opportunity to introduce my colleague, Sam Mitchell, who is going to be running the first part and the meaty part of our program today with our presentation. So Sam, take it away.
Thank you, Deborah. I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody just to make sure that the presentation goes smoothly. But thanks again and welcome to September Business-Wise Insiders. I hope you all had a good Labor Day weekend, and hopefully you're rested up and ready to learn and engage. And as I said, since we have a large number of attendees, I'm just going to keep everybody on mute through the duration of the presentation, but we'll hold breakout sessions at the end and give everybody a chance to engage with each other and share some ideas. And that's also because Business-Wise Insiders has traditionally been about engagement and networking and personal interaction. Obviously, in this era of Zoom calls, we're not as able to do that as we'd like. So the breakout sessions give a good opportunity to sort of adhere to some of the principles that we wanted to when we created Business-Wise Insiders. But because you're on mute, you won't have an opportunity to ask verbal questions during the presentation. So if you have a question, either write it down or ask it in the chat window, and we'll try to address it during the breakout sessions. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, so bear with me. Sorry, one moment. There we go. Everybody can see that? Great. So today's topic is something that hopefully gets at one of the most common challenges in sales, which is when your prospects say no. And we're going to offer some advice about how to turn that resistance into leads and appointments. And before I start, I just wanted to emphasize that the no's we're talking about for the purposes of this presentation are the ones that you get at the very beginning of the prospecting process when you're working to set those first-time appointments with new prospects. And even though some of the material in this presentation may apply later in the sales process because there are lots of different types of no's along the way, we're really focused on overcoming that initial resistance to a first-time appointment. So with that in mind, put yourself in that mindset of reaching out to a new prospect for the first time. And think about what you say when you reach out, whether it's over the phone or in an email and your prospect says no. And there are a couple of important points here. The first is that this is almost a trick question because just about everyone says no to that first request. And in fact, it's so uncommon for a prospect to eagerly accept that you have to wonder what's going on there and whether that's an opportunity that's going to lead to a valuable relationship. So really what we're asking here is when that initial resistance inevitably comes, are you prepared to respond, and what is your strategy? And essentially all no's boil down to one fact, and that's that we as sales reps haven't yet demonstrated enough value for the prospect to choose to invest their time in a meeting with you or in an additional conversation with you. And there are really sort of 4 different common categories of prospect resistance that I've laid out here on this slide. The first is sort of a generic, not interested, or I'm doing fine with the status quo. So don't have a problem, I'm happy with the way things are. The second would be a bad experience. So I've tried something similar before and it was terrible. The third is bad timing. You hear this a lot. We either have a lot going on, I don't have time to meet right now, or our budget is spread too thin, we don't have enough money for this sort of investment. And then the final one is more info. And you hear this a lot too, sort of a brush off of send me some info and I'll get back to you. But each of these objections has a deeper meaning for you to uncover. So if this is what your prospect says, then underneath there's a meaning. What does your prospect really mean? And more to the point, that deeper meaning beneath each objection is one of 2 things. It either reveals that the prospect's pain, and presents you with an opportunity to demonstrate value, or it reveals that the prospect really isn't a good fit for you after all and allows you to move on. So put more simply, each objection gives you the opportunity to either prove your value or to disqualify the prospect. And before we go into each one, I just want to invite Deborah to add anything that she thinks might be valuable on this point. Deborah, just need to unmute.
You're on mute, Deb.
There we go.
Thank you. So like all of our presentations, we're really trying to remind ourselves and all of y'all to do everything you can to think about how things are from your prospect's point of view. Because we all know of all the good reasons why our prospects should want to meet with us. And they know none of them, nor do they care at this point.
Right. Thank you. So that brings us to the first objection, which is not interested, status quo. So here you have a prospect giving sort of a standard version of the not interested objection. No thanks, I'm not really thinking about that right now and things are going fine. I don't want or need it. And on the right, you have some possible subtext, what they might actually be saying that gives you an opportunity to show some value. So what it could mean is, it hadn't occurred to me that I might have a problem or that I could benefit from a solution. So if we're looking at how to dig deeper, the not interested objection is sort of one of the most common catch-all ways a prospect can resist. And it can take a couple of different forms. Either this isn't a problem that's important right now, I don't see the benefit, we don't even have that problem, things are going fine. And it's a blank slate that invites you to respond with open-ended questions to help uncover the pain. So here are 3 possible ways to respond to that. If X isn't a problem right now, what are your problems and priorities? Get them to engage a little bit more and open up about what their challenges and pain points might be. Can you tell me a little bit about what you've done that's working so well? We like this one a lot because it sort of takes that status quo, things are going fine objection and turns it around. Says, well, you know, I'd love to know why you don't have that problem and what we might be able to learn from that. And then finally, sort of a disqualifying question. So can you clarify for me, does that mean you're not looking for new clients in your local market? And this last question here is an example of one that we might ask at BusinessWise, since what we offer is a prospecting tool to help people find those new clients, but you can adapt it to whatever product, service, or solution that you might offer. And the key points for this objection and for the core of this presentation are really to expect that resistance and be prepared to respond. So before you call, before you reach out to somebody, be clear on the value that you bring to that first appointment, even if they don't buy. Expect the no and be willing to ask again in a way that helps clarify what they really want and need. And then, as Deb just mentioned, bring the focus back to them. Prospects are interested in their own challenges and priorities. So even if they're not interested in what you've just offered, they are interested in something, and it's your job to find out what that is. So take that no as an opportunity to dig a little deeper and make it about them. And a final sort of underlying point here is that it's up to you to decide who you want to meet with based on whether you think you can provide something that benefits them. So in addition to digging deeper in an opportunity to provide value for your prospect, this is for you too to decide whether it's going to be worth your time and whether the relationship is one that you want to invest time in pursuing. Anything you want to add, Deb?
I always think about the old-fashioned retail world, which I haven't seen in 6 months, but I do remember that when you were in a retail store, the clerk would come up to you and say, "May I help you?" And of course, what we all said was, "No thanks, I'm just looking." And then maybe, "Where are the socks?" We came in for the socks, but our first automatic answer was, "No, just looking." And the same thing is true here. We have to expect the no's, but more importantly, we have to be prepared to know how we're going to handle them.
Thanks, Deb. So the second objection would be bad timing. And so here the prospect might say, we have a lot going on, our budget is spread thin, it's not a good time. But what they might really mean is we're a little overwhelmed dealing with our problems and priorities. So what's the best way to unpack the bad timing objection? And here you actually have a few different good options. The first is to go right at the heart of the objection. If it's a bad time, then something is keeping them from addressing their problems, which is itself a problem. So here the first suggestion would be to say, it's too bad that you don't feel able to address your problem right now. Why is that? What might you do about it? The second strategy would be to emphasize something that I talked about at the beginning, is that you're not asking them, and you shouldn't be asking them, for anything more than a no strings attached meeting at this point. They'll get some ideas, it costs them nothing, so timing and budget shouldn't really even be a concern. And then the final response is based on the fact that the flip side of not now is that another time might be better. And that gives you an opportunity to do a couple things, to ask what might change between now and another time that would change the circumstances, and it provides an opportunity for you to create a mutually agreed upon time frame for follow-up. And the key points here are to just think about it at its essence. If not now, then when and why? And if the answer is not now, create a plan for follow-up. And then something important to emphasize is that that final point of bad timing often means that we don't have the budget right now, which again is its own ready-made pain point. If you can just demonstrate value in the form of ROI, then a budget may magically appear. So to use this bad timing as an opportunity to dig deeper into the fact that bad timing and no budget is actually a problem in and of itself, and to provide value based on those pivot points. Deb, did you have anything?
Not now.
Okay. So the third objection would be bad experience. When a prospect has had a bad experience with a similar product or service in the past. And what your prospect might say is, I tried something similar before and it's terrible. I'm not making the same mistake twice. And on the right, it could really mean I had a problem and I tried to fix it. It didn't work. And now I'm fearful of spending money on another doomed attempt. And this is a really interesting objection because it gives you a lot of fertile ground to work with. The bad experience objection is an explicit acknowledgement that your prospect knows he or she has a problem that needs fixing. And since uncovering pain is the first step towards discussing solutions, this kind of objection is actually a great opportunity to ask pointed questions to get your prospect talking. So you could say things like, I'm sorry to hear that. Could you tell me more about your underlying challenges? How bad is it? Have you tried anything else since your last bad experience? Why do you think it didn't work? And how much do you think your failure to address your problem is costing you? And in some ways, this presents sort of a two-pronged problem that you could go at. The first is the original problem that your prospect tried to address but failed. And then the second is this newfound fear of addressing it. And you can use both along the lines of this last suggestion to illustrate the costs of inaction. So again, the first key point is a bad experience means that they understand they have a problem. Then that fear of acting and failing is a new problem. But the final thing here, and we've covered value proposition in another BusinessWise Insiders presentation, but this is an opportunity to highlight a key point of your value proposition, was that is you're unique. Something differentiates you from your competitors. So the fact that somebody had a bad experience with a different product or service that's similar to the one you provide shouldn't mean that they don't do business with you, and it gives you an opportunity to show why you're unique. Anything to add, Deb?
I do want to add something here. And one of the biggest challenges about this discussion, which is important, is that it's easy to go down a rabbit hole at this time and start talking about your product or service when the point of this call was to set an appointment. So even while you go through this process in an initial way, it's really important to keep your eye on the fact that your goal is not to sell your product and service at this time, way too early. Your goal is to get the appointment. So make sure you pivot from this discussion to the value that you're going to bring to this appointment. And that makes a big difference.
Very good point. And so that brings us to our final category objection, which is send me more info. On the left, you have the prospect saying, why don't you send me some info and I'll get back to you? But what it could mean is I don't want to deal with this or you right now, so I'm going to stall and then ignore you. And I probably do this with all my problems. So what's the best strategy in this case? If a prospect asks you to send more information, it's usually just a stalling tactic, but it's also an opportunity to ask questions and plan a follow-up. It's sort of a no without being a hard no, and that may be for a variety of reasons. Maybe just the prospect is uncomfortable giving you a hard no at that moment. But it's very important at this point to focus on trying to get at their pain in that initial conversation rather than agreeing to send more info and letting them off the hook. But again, you can take this in a few different directions. The first is to take their objection as a cue to show them that you don't want to waste their time. So to say something like, I'm happy to send info, but I want to make sure it's relevant. Tell me more about what you'd like to know. And that shows them that you're respectful of their time. Pointing them to your website probably isn't going to help. So ask a pointed question about what would be relevant to them so you can make sure to be as helpful as possible. And after they answer, you can say, what about that interests you? What specific challenges are you hoping to address in an attempt to uncover a specific pain? And then finally, as a last resort, if the resistance to dealing with the pain points is too much at that moment, you can always use that request for more info to create a follow-up plan and to get them to agree to a conversation a few days down the road, at which point you can ask more specific questions about the information you did send them. And the key points here are that some prospects will attempt to stall rather than outright resist. And then a request for info is another opportunity, as with all these objections, to dig and qualify. And as a last resort, follow-up info provides another opportunity to engage if that's where it goes. But again, if possible, aim to get your answer on that first call rather than to kick the can down the road. And then if you are forced to follow up, be very clear and strategic about what that follow-up plan would look like. Anything, Deb?
As salespeople, we all have happy ears. And it's very easy to believe when someone asks for more information that they really will read it, consider it, get back to us, or allow us to, or accept our call when we follow up. Real world tells us that's usually not the case. When somebody tells us to send information, unless it's specific information, if it's just just send me whatever you generally send to your prospects, just know we're not in a good spot. We need to find out more. They're probably being polite or uncomfortable about saying no, and we're in trouble. What that means, and what we have to keep asking ourselves is, why didn't I bring enough value to this prospect for meeting with me? Why didn't I show them enough reasons to be curious about the value that we bring in this appointment we're going to have? And it has to be value that we're going to bring, ideas, opportunities, a new way of thinking about something, or our prospects aren't going to waste their time with us. Just because we really want to meet isn't enough of a reason for our prospect to spend time. So we have to know what kind of value it is that we can bring that would actually compel somebody to say yes about spending time.
So there's one last thing I wanted to cover now that we've gone over the 4 different categories of objections, and that is how to handle rejection when it comes over email as opposed to in person or in a cold call. And the reason this is so important is because email rejections are unique in both in that they present a unique challenge and a unique opportunity. So part of this is because I think a lot of sales reps either look at email as something that doesn't really work. And so when they get a no, it just reinforces something they were predisposed to believe anyway. Or they see it as a quick fix that's going to get all these yes responses. And so they really focus only on those, and a no really means no. But when you think about it, when a prospect gets an email from you, they have two options. Either they ignore it completely, or they read it, doesn't resonate, and they can delete it. Or on the other hand, they can respond with a no. And there's a big difference between those two. Far too often, sales reps would take these no's at face value, but really, it means that your message resonated. If a prospect replies, that means they opened it, read it, and took the time to write a response. And that gives you an opportunity to engage on a level that a prospect ignoring and deleting your email does not. We've talked before about automated email prospecting, which is a service we offer to our clients at BusinessWise. Basically, it mimics one-off emails from sales reps to prospects, and the goal, rather than registering for an event or downloading white paper, is to get direct replies to your inbox. And what we've seen is there's a big difference between clients who use those no's as a chance to engage and the ones who ignore them. It can mean the difference between a successful campaign and a less successful campaign. If nothing else, responding to a no shows that you're a real person who wants to engage at a specific personal level. And one extreme example of this that we always like to talk about is we have one client who found a creative response to out of office replies. Said something like, I hope you're having a good time away from the office. If you have a chance to take a look at my email when you get back, I'd love to plan a conversation. And in a lot of cases, it generated a personal response from the prospect that led to an additional conversation. And of course, that's not resistance in the same context as what we've talked about in the rest of this presentation, but it shows how email no's can provide a hook for you to show that you are personal and attentive. And if we have any of our email prospecting clients in this session, we'd be happy to talk through different strategies for responding to email rejection, different, basically how to handle different kinds of no's that come over email, and along the lines of how we've discussed it in this presentation. So that brings us to the end of the presentation portion of the session. And in a moment, I'm just going to split everybody into breakout sessions. We'll have our own reps from Dallas, Atlanta, and Charlotte in each session. And I'll come into each session and just make sure everybody is there and ready to go and to kick things off. And you'll be able to unmute yourself as soon as you enter the breakout room. But if you could just wait one moment to let our wise guys introduce themselves and start the discussion, that would be great. And thanks again, everybody, and bear with me while I begin the sessions.